Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Fontanazza, editor of Food Safety Tech, and I will be your host for today's webinar, The More the Merrier, a multi-hurdle approach to detection, sponsored by P&P Optica. Now, before we begin, I'd like to review some housekeeping items. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. If you have problems with the audio, please try to increase your computer's volume. If you're still having issues, log out and try to reconnect. Contact Veronica Allen via the chat box if technical issues continue. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send them in at any time during the presentation. We will collect and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. During today's event, you will also be asked to participate in 2 quick polls. If you have any issues accessing the poll, please submit your responses to Veronica Allen via the chat box. You can download today's presentation from the handouts pane on the GoToWebinar panel. Make sure to download the file during the webinar as it will not be emailed to you after the event. And now I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. Jeremiah Johnson is Corporate Manager for Regulatory Compliance, Food Safety and Sanitation at Hormel Foods. He will be followed by Olga Pawluczyk, co-founder and CEO of P&P Optica. And now I'll turn the floor over to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, welcome.
Thanks, Maria, and good morning or afternoon to everyone. Excited to be here today. Before I get started talking about Formatrill, just going to give a quick brief introduction to Hormel Foods. Our motto is originate, don't imitate, and that can be seen throughout our culture as an organization. From the products we are innovating to our production process, and it leads to our overall approach to how we look at Formatrill and process enhancements. Oops. A couple of other things, with $9.6 billion in net sales, 12 consecutive years a corporate best citizen, 55 consecutive years of dividend increases, 20,000 inspired people across our organization. Sorry, still getting used to this. And some of you may not know all of our brands, but you can find us throughout the store, from the center of the store to the deli to the frozen section. Spam, Hormel Chili, Skippy, Justin's Columbus, Jennie-O Turkey, Applegate, Holy Guacamole are some of our more prominent brands. And just recently, we announced the acquisition of Planters under our portfolio as well. And leading into our discussion here today around Formatrill and our approach to Formatrill and the multi-hurdle approach and making your process the best that it can be, just want to highlight our cultural beliefs as an organization, and they are seen here. These are the foundation of everything that we do as an organization. You might hear me coin some or speak some of these terms as I talk today, but really what we're talking about is creating solutions, improving our process, and meeting our customers' expectations in a way that with safety first in mind and results matter. But these are our cultural beliefs. That's who Hormel is as an organization. And let's get into a case study around Formatrill. And I'm going to start out by airing some dirty laundry. This isn't fun, and it is kind of therapeutic at the same time, but we have a history of some challenges, and kind of going to set the stage on why we took such an aggressive approach to Formatrill detection in our process. We had some high-profile recalls. In 2015, we had a recall of our Skippy peanut butter because of metal in metal shavings. Shortly after that, we had to recall some Dinnie beef stew due to Formatrill, and then a couple years later, our Spam brand was also subject to a recall of Formatrill. And we're going to dive into each one of these events a little bit here. So starting out with the Dinnie recall, and what you are seeing here is a flashlight that is no longer in one piece. And what happened here is we have in our process, we have grids and so forth that protect the pumps that pump our product through the process. And we have identified those an opportunity to see things and identify potential for material. And we found pieces of plastic during one of those checks. We started an investigation, we took corrective actions, and 3 days later, guess what we found? More pieces of that same type of plastic behind that same grid. And within that 3-day window, we had some product get out of our control, and that was the product that we ended up recalling. 40 cases of product were out of our control that we recalled because of this event. Going to that Skippy recall that I mentioned, these are the metal shavings that we found on a magnet. So in that process of making peanut butter, part of our detection is inline magnets, and we found some metal, and that clued us into an issue in our process. We knew we had a problem. We didn't feel comfortable with the product. We placed that product on hold. And a couple weeks later, we realized that 153 cases were no longer in our control, and we had to recall. But what do these events have in common? And if we're with you today in person, I would love to get some feedback from you in the audience. But what these events have in common is we had them under our control. We had controls in our process where we identified a problem. We took control over that product. We took corrective actions, but somehow there was a failure. There's a failure in communication. There's a breakdown in established practices and policies and procedures, and it ended up in our brands potentially being impacted with those recalls. Following those 2 recalls, we went on a very intensive and extensive and form material improvement journey. We had 3 focus areas. They were on consumer complaints. That was right around the same time FSIS was heightening their awareness and putting some additional scrutiny around consumer complaints. We looked at our internal investigation and reporting process. When we do have these events, how are we investigating them? How are we reporting them? How are we making sure that they are corrected? And then we implemented a process that was called a foreign material assessment, which was basically using the hazard analysis and HACCP principles for foreign material, and removing just the food safety aspect of foreign material and looking at all possible foreign material. And the next year, the results were really good. We improved, we had comprehensive standardized programs. We saw a 50% reduction in cost related to product loss related to foreign material. So we were feeling really good. And then this happened. This is the foreign material this is the metal that was found in cans of Spam that led to the recall of Spam. We received 2 consumer complaints. So our consumers actually found this for us. We received 2 complaints. We initiated an immediate investigation. We had a known event happen on the day in question. That event had documented corrective actions and preventive measures and so forth. We had metal detection and X-ray on the production line making this product, and this still made it through and made it to one of our consumers. So now we took a step back, and now what went wrong? And here is where we switched gears, and we took a 3-step approach to improving our process across our organization when it comes to foreign material. And the 3 focus areas were around culture, detection, and prevention. I'm going to talk about each 3 of those areas today. But what went wrong? Did we listen to our complaints? Yes, we did. We absolutely listened to our complaints. We received the complaints. We conducted an immediate investigation. We realized we had an issue on the day in question, and we took immediate action on that product in question. Did we correct the incident properly? We had an incident. We knew that something happened. Still, that foreign object made it into the product. So obviously, we didn't correct the incident properly. So we knew that there was something there that we needed to address. And did we have the proper controls in our process? So I mentioned we had metal detection. We had X-ray. We had the opportunity to find and remove this from our process, but it failed. It didn't work. So why did that happen? All right, so let's start out with prevention. And when it comes to prevention, kind of culturally, we had a very strong emphasis on continuous improvement, and we still do. Continuous improvement, learning from your mistakes still plays a strong role in our organization. But what we started challenging ourselves is kind of flipping that switch from a continuous improvement mentality to a prevention mentality. And think of it this way. So think of continuous improvement as learning from your mistakes, where prevention was having a plan, thinking ahead about what might happen and preparing for it and having a plan for it. Continuous improvement, we thought we took a look at ourselves in the mirror and said, you know, we're starting to tolerate these mistakes, and we wanted to start anticipating them. Also at the same time, when it comes to continuous improvement, it's all about breaking that cycle, where with our prevention plan, it's all about progressing forward. Again, anticipating and having a plan and moving your process forward. And that was kind of the central theme in regards to everything that we did in our form material journey. When it comes to prevention, we have a form material prevention manual. It is 42 chapters of fun. Various monitoring and verification requirements are included. Here's an example of some of those chapters. Again, this is where learning from your mistakes, when we have events that happen, we create policies and practices around them so they don't happen again, and we do that across our entire organization. But when it comes to these chapters and all these responsibility, who do you think is responsible for executing these requirements? It's not us sitting in the corporate office, you know, writing them. It is our operators on the production floor. So all of these chapters, all of these things, all of these expectations involves an individual, one of our valued team members. They have a responsibility while they're making our products to do some of these checks, to make sure that we are keeping foreign objects and making safe product. So that drove our need to really talk about culture and focus on culture. Some of the things that we did, I don't have the magic bullet or the magic answer when it regards to this, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit here. But I do want to share some of the things that we focused on and some of the process improvements that we made across our organization in regards to culture. We branded our food safety program. We standardized monthly food safety training and had that available in multiple languages. We have 16 different languages that are spoken across our manufacturing facilities. We have food safety animated training video content, and that video is with our food safety mascot, Silver and Ware. And we celebrated our current food safety heroes. So we launched Food Safety Awareness Week in May, and every single year we have Food Safety Awareness Week, and that week is dedicated to celebrating all of the amazing things our team members are doing across our plants in regards to food safety. So here's some pictures of some of the training. There's Silver and Ware, our food safety super. We actually make T-shirts and capes for the heroes that we're celebrating, and some of the different things that we're doing. But when it comes to training, you know, that the question that we're constantly asking ourselves, and I'm sure all of you are doing the same thing, is we recognize that our employees, that human element, they are our most important resource. So how do we drive that accountability? How do we get them to want to do these things every time and gain that willing cooperation? One of the main things that we looked at, just as a starting point, was celebrating speak up, embracing speak up, that cultural belief that I mentioned. So when mistakes happen, don't hide it. Don't punish our team members for those mistakes, but recognize them for speaking up and bringing it to our attention so we can correct it and move on. And then moving into detection, our third area and our third focus area. When it comes to detection, so I mentioned that we had detection capabilities on this line. We actually had what you might call a multi-hurdle approach. So when we took a step back, these are some of the questions that we asked ourselves when it comes to detection. So the first question is, are our processes and production equipment set up for success? The second question is, what confidence do we have with our detection equipment, and do we truly understand its capabilities and limitations? And the last question is, what is the best technology at that specific point in the process? And with that one, working very closely with our vendors, and again, taking that multi-hurdle approach. So you're probably asking yourselves, how did that toothpick sized metal fragment get through a metal detector and an X-ray machine? So on this particular day, the metal detector was not functioning. So as the product is being filled into the cans, it went through a pipeline metal detector. I can tell you that that piece of metal definitely would have been picked up by that pipeline metal detector. We verified that throughout this process, but that metal detector was not running that day. And our operational team made the decision that it was okay to not run that metal detector because we had X-ray on the finished product. And that X-ray machine, come to find out, with how the diodes are passing through that particular can and how how that piece of metal was positioned in the can, that the X-ray machine never would have detected it. So if you think of a can and the diode's going through this way, if it would have gone through the stick completely, but it was going through this way, so it was too small to detect. But because we had that X-ray machine, because we were calibrating that machine to a very small seed size, we thought that we were good. But turns out we truly didn't understand what the true capabilities of that machine were. All right, so sorry, jumped ahead a little bit here again. So one of the things that we have done when it comes to detection too is we have implemented a start clean, stay clean philosophy. And one of the things that we are doing is that there's two primary objectives to this strategy. Inspecting all incoming materials so that we know those incoming materials are clean before we introduce them to our process. So using clean raw materials, using raw materials that we know are free of foreign objects, allows us to, when foreign material does happen in our process, focus on those events so we can truly get down to root cause and make sure they don't happen again. But we can also focus on supplier accountability, so driving corrective actions with our suppliers. And here is where we are truly implementing this multi-stage detection system. We are using metal detection, we are using X-ray, and we are using a vision system of some sort to get a full picture of the objects coming into our process. And when it comes to that system, one thing that we're focusing on as an organization, because metal detection, X-ray are primary forms of detection that we have across our plants. Another thing that we are doing is really looking at and truly understanding what are the capabilities of that machine. When that product runs through that metal detector and that X-ray, and we're doing the same thing with our vision systems as well, and working very closely with our vendors to help that. This is exactly what Olga is going to be talking about here in a little bit, but truly knowing what that machine is doing for your process. There's a couple of things that we do internally when it comes to doing that, and that's focusing on the balance between probability of detection and false reject rate. So probability of detection is knowing what the lowest seed size is detectable, and to detect that seed size 100% of the time. You may have a target that you want to get to, and what we've kind of realized and told ourselves, it's okay if we don't get to that target. It's okay if we don't get to 1 millimeter. We want to know what the true capabilities are, and let's detect at that level. And at the same time, you don't want to go too sensitive so that you're having false rejects. Another thing that we discovered, and as we were investigating in these recalls, is some of our machines had a very high amount of false rejects. And our operators that were running those machines were then losing their confidence in the machine itself, and losing their confidence in not thinking that there were actually foreign material being detected. So you want to find that balance and have minimum false rejects, and truly know how low it can detect to. think I talked about all that already. And just to kind of wrap up here before I pass it over to Olga, that's a perfect transition to what Olga is going to be talking about. And hopefully you can see the slide better. It's showing up kind of blurry on my end. Actually, yeah, it doesn't look like the numbers transitioned over to Google properly, but you can see the increase. You can see the graph and how it's increasing over time. This is tonnage of a combination of FSIS and FDA inspected product, and the amount of product that between those two regulatory bodies are being recalled over time. And you can see since 2015, there is a drastic increase in recall tonnage related to foreign material. FSIS in particular has a very high focus area on this. They have very, very strict requirements around adulteration that they are currently enforcing. And we are definitely seeing it as an industry. I think there was actually one quarter recently where foreign material actually took over as being the #1 reason for recalls over mislabeling for the first time. So definitely a lot of regulatory pressure out there, definitely a need for this. And from here, we'll hand it over to Olga.
And just so everybody knows, before Olga begins her presentation, we have a poll appearing on the screen, and that'll be continuing for about 30 more seconds. Thanks, Jeremiah, for that really great presentation. I'm sure that the audience appreciates your really candid information sharing there. Okay, great. So the poll has closed. Welcome, Olga.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Jeremiah, again, for your open discussion about how Hormel handles foreign materials. Now I will try to kind of take over where you were, where you stopped, and talk a little bit about how do detection systems work and what are some of the aspects that affect how well detection systems can find foreign materials. So right now, I'll just focus on some terminology and then talk a bit about what factors affect the performance of inspection systems, and then started going a little bit towards what P&P has been working on for the last decade or so, is using light for detection of foreign materials and other types of inspection, and how everything fits together. And then also talk about other types of technologies that can be used for detection and inspection. I will finally end with our systems and describe how they work as well. So detection is not just the ability to see something. Not only do we have to see it, we have to make a decision whether something has occurred, or measure that something, and actually make some sort of recommendation. It's not sufficient to just see that something happened. And automation, it takes things even further. Automation is supposed to help us to enhance the process and automate decision making. So we see, we think, we make a decision. And all of that is really important in how we collect information and how we can act upon it in a plant. But stepping back a little bit, what we consider as an event or something happening, like a foreign object coming into the stream, is really a mathematical concept and also reality of what can be done in measurement system. So consider something like having a medical condition or a presence of foreign material in the stream of production. The reality is that we have either something is true or something is false. However, when we go to measuring that, no measurement is perfect. So instead of seeing something that might be true, we might see also false positives or false rejections occurring. And we can also see true rejections occurring. So essentially what we're measuring, the line between truth and this kind of reality, the purple line in my slide, is what we would like to measure, but what we're actually measuring is the green line. So we make mistakes on both sides. Sometimes we mislabel something and pretend that and don't see it, or we say something is there, but actually there's nothing there. So that really needs to be tuned, the ability to see as many good objects as possible, or true determinations as possible, while minimizing false rejections or false positives. The other aspect of a lot of detection systems is the fact that size really affects how well we can see it. So not all objects can be seen at the same sizes. And again, it's a statistical distribution of which sizes of objects we can detect. And that's influenced by many aspects of the detection systems. But in generally, the smaller an object, most technologies will have an issue finding those. And then as objects grow in sizes, most technology will be able to see more and more, larger percentage of those objects. So this concept of a detection curve that shows you kind of what's the percentage or probability of detection at a given size is very important to look at when you're assessing detection systems. Because, for example, you might be finding very small objects once in a while, but you're still not finding large objects very often. So is that a good detection system? Yeah, once in a while, like humans, we can see 0.5 millimeter object. However, a dancing elephant will be missed. So those are really important concepts to think about when you're looking at any inspection or detection system. The other aspect is the false rejects or false positives are also critical. So oftentimes when machines are being described, we will say, well, we reject only 1% of our pixels or falsely mislabel 1% of the pixels. But really, when a system is supposed to be used in automation in a factory setting, we have to kind of step back and go thinking about what percentage of our actual product we might reject falsely if we tune our sensitivity or ability to see very small objects too high. So that balance between false positives or false rejects and sensitivity, how small can we see how often, is very crucial, and it's always a trade-off. So you have to really talk with your vendors and discuss what are the needs of a given problem and how we can work with you to really tune a system to reject as little of your good product as possible, but see as many foreign objects that you need to see as possible. So you might ask me, well, Olga, is there something like a perfect detection system? And the problem is there is, but that perfect detection system is something you won't want me to install in your line because it rejects everything. So we could find 100% of all foreign objects if we rejected everything in your line. Other than that, there is no technology that can do that can find 100% of foreign objects, and that is a fact. Just like in cancer diagnosis, if you have some sort of imaging done, there is a chance that a sickness or cancer was missed. Same is unfortunately true for any technology entering a plant. So, okay, that's a little bit depressing. So how can we actually address this problem? So there are several techniques or several approaches that you can use to mitigate the lack of perfect detection system. And first thing is understanding the problem. What do you need to find? What is your background material? So are you looking at something very uniform, like very fine ground meat, or are you looking at something complex, like bacon bits or complex trim from multiple parts of an animal? Picking the right approach and understanding the trade-offs between different approaches and different technologies is important. And then also mitigating problems in the environment. So I'm sure you're aware that if you have electromagnetic interference close to metal detectors, they might not perform as well. So understanding the technology you're using and understanding what affects their ability to detect. So salinity of product also affects metal detectors, will give you a better knowledge of how your detection system works in plant. And probably one of the most smart approaches is to realize that no detection is perfect, no technology is perfect, but it is possible to get more information by using multi-hurdle approach, something that Jeremiah already said quite a bit about. But consider medical imaging. Again, different types of modalities allow physicians to diagnose different types of problems. And same is true in any detection problem, including foreign materials. So now that I talked a little bit about the generalities of detection, there are several factors that tend to affect most types of technology and inspection systems. So, for example, it's important to understand what resolution means. So, limit to detail. If you have very high resolution camera, you can zoom in and see very fine detail, but you are losing then on processing speed and maybe ability to collect information quickly. So, again, there is a bit of a trade-off resolution and performance. Something like motion artifacts, you know, when there is wind blowing, taking a photo is much more difficult than taking a still in a low motion environment. Same is true for X-rays. If things are moving too quickly, there will be artifacts that are generated. Metal detectors create artifacts, and obviously vision systems as well. The amount of signal that we can collect. So we could collect a lot of information if we had a long time of exposure or a lot of light being shown on something or X-rays going through something. But again, you have to, there is a trade-off between speed of acquisition of image and physical constraints. You know, how powerful an X-ray tube do you want to use in a plant? How much light can you actually shine at an object without warming it up too much or something like that? So light levels or energy levels are very important. And finally, one criteria that not too many people think about, but is very, very important, is the complexity of the background on which you want to be detecting information. So to give you an example, in X-rays, a lot of mammography images are difficult to interpret because there's a lot of connective tissues in the breast. Same thing goes for something like detection of foreign objects on a very roughly ground, very complex mixture of meat, for example, or non-uniformity of the surface. So if you don't flatten your product to provide a nice uniformity of surface, you can imagine that even X-rays will have a very difficult time detecting small density variations when the density of the product as the X-rays are passing through will also vary just because of its height and volume. So that complexity of background, what are you looking at typically, and what are the objects that you're trying to find is probably one of the most critical problems to think about. And from my experience, not too many people actually consider that. Even when you're tuning a system, and you're using, beads on a cardboard box or something like that, well, it's not really representative of what the actual material will look like when it's passing through your system. And how do you talk to a supplier like myself to actually understand what will the performance in line on the product be? And the final aspect is really, the noise of the environment and variability of the environment also affects how well we can detect a signal. So, if you're talking to somebody, having a quiet conversation in a quiet room, it's really easy to see it, but to hear it. But in a concert, it's very difficult to, or maybe even impossible, to hear a quiet conversation. Same is true for detection systems. So if your environment is continuously changing, lights are flickering, temperature is fluctuating a lot, that will affect how your detection system can perform and what is this minimum signal and minimum information it can extract. So I talked a lot about different types of technologies, kind of going into what light systems do. Or vision systems do, is really shining some sort of energy on an object. So X-rays are very high energy photons. Then we can go to UV, which is slightly lower energy, then into visible light, which is even lower energy, and so forth into near infrared and infrared. So the source of energy is really important, whether it's a target in X-rays or a light bulb in vision systems. That energy then interacts with an object. The energy that was shown somehow gets modified, and then we detect and display and make a decision on that. So when you step back and look at light or other electromagnetic radiation, the interaction with an object depends on the wavelength or the energy of that light, and also what the object is made out of. There are different types of interactions of photons that happen. So in X-rays, most photons are absorbed, very few are scattered, for example, or reflected back. Whereas in visible imaging, a lot of photons are scattered and reflected off of a surface, and only few go through the object. And that is very much wavelength dependent. So we can use that wavelength dependency to implement science of spectroscopy into detection of foreign objects. Based on the molecular structure and strength of molecular bonds inside of your product, different wavelengths of light will be absorbed differently, and therefore we can detect those changes and actually tell you what chemistry is of your product. And vision systems have been using that for a long time. Frankly, your eyes are a very rough spectrometer because we see three colors. We can interact with the environment and kind of make predictions on what things are made out of. So the fact that grass is green, you can infer that it holds chlorophyll because the chlorophyll absorbed all the colors of light and only reflected green. So camera systems are exactly that. They're a copy of our eyeball, and they see three color bands, blue, red, and green, and collecting those three channels allows you to differentiate some foreign objects. So for example, a lot of typical vision systems are much better at seeing blue plastics in the production line than other things like white plastics or cardboard, which now starts blending in with the background, and there's just not enough information to differentiate those objects. So what people have done is, okay, well, if three color bands are great, let's use more color bands. So we now have something called multispectral imaging systems, which now look at maybe 10, 20 color bands that are specifically selected for the objects of that you want to be looking at, and now you can differentiate those objects better. So maybe one plastic will have a band that's a little bit stronger in this blue and that green, for example. So multispectral imaging has been used in food now for a while, for example, in produce sorting and those kinds of applications. But we haven't seen that really taking off in meat processing because multispectral imaging is very limited. It can only see what it's been trained to see, and it's blind to things that it wasn't designed to see, because you picked the wavelengths that are very important for your product. So what we are doing is we're actually collecting the entire spectral band and seeing hundreds of spectral wavelengths all at the same time with a hyperspectral imaging system. So for a pixel on our conveyor line, we see hundreds of information points. And based on those very minute changes from pixel to pixel, we can not only predict chemistry of what we've already learned, but over time we can learn what that new material might be. So detecting foreign materials, is a challenge, and not all systems can do a great job. What we are proposing is that PPO smart imaging or hyperspectral imaging is a very good technology to not only see what very minute differences between background and foreground, but we can also identify the materials by chemistry. And unlike X-ray systems, which only see density changes, we see chemical changes. So let's step back. Okay, so what, Olga, you've been talking about this. What are the limitations of different inspection and detection modalities? Well, the first modality that we all always go back to is using manual inspection. And humans are fantastic at finding really tiny objects. They're really good at that, but we all have that discussion, but yesterday they missed the shovel. And each individual human varies quite a bit. So based on their, sight, their age, their mental predisposition, they might miss more objects than other people. And then over time, their vigilance or ability to stare at the product also decreases. So this is data obtained in fuselage inspection for airplanes and also nuclear plant inspection. And you can see that over time, the ability for a person to concentrate and actually look at objects decreases dramatically with time. It also depends, human performance also depends on, the organizational structure. So if they're trained well, if they're supported well, if they're rewarded well, that influences. Obviously, environment, ergonomics, temperature affects human performance. So there is a tremendous amount of variability in how humans perform from day to day. And that's why automation and introducing new technologies is such a good idea. X-ray machines have been a workhorse of this problem, and they're excellent on finding some types of foreign objects. They're very well understood. They have parallels in medicine. It's relatively easy to implement them. The problem is that they cannot see low density materials. So things like cardboard, like certain types of plastics, cannot be seen by X-rays. The benefit is that X-rays see bulk material, so it's not a surface-only measurement. Metal detectors, also something that you probably are very well familiar with, use electrical conductivity for detection, can see some very small objects, but are affected by a lot of external factors. So salt, for example, in your product will affect the ability to detect things, cannot detect, obviously, anything that's not ferrous, and actually has pretty hard time detecting where a particular foreign object is located, so requires additional search and handling of the product. Camera systems are entering now into the market for food imaging, and especially meat. and can see much finer details than X-rays or metal detectors. Color often represents chemical information. They're relatively safe, inexpensive, and are quite safe. And there are so many non-food applications that the ecosystem of knowledge is very high. The problem is the visible light methodology is very dependent on the surface, and then low contrast images are very difficult to process and see foreign objects. There is also much more pressure on vision systems to perform complex calculations much faster than something like metal detectors or X-rays. So the technology is just catching up to very high-speed applications like food processing. Multispectral systems, again, I talked a little bit about that, see more materials, have more data to collect, but the problem is they're tuned to a specific material or two to be that can be detected. And finally, we have the hyperspectral systems that can see chemistry of the food as it's being processed, but really have really hit their stride over the last decade or so, where the computing power and AI and machine learning has enabled us to actually process tremendous amounts of information quickly enough to make decisions in a plant setting. So at PPO, I gave you I foreshadowed quite a bit of the discussion, but we use hyperspectral imaging to help with automation. We've worked on this technology for multiple years, but it's really a combination of exceptionally good spectrometers that can provide a lot of information in fractions of a second, and then processing that information with machine learning and AI technology to really interpret this vast amount of information into actionable. Yes, there is a problem with your product. It has a foreign material, or is low quality, or has the wrong composition, and we can immediately reject it into a bin or a side conveyor belt. Our systems are now fully operational, both in poultry and pork plants. And as you can see, even on very complex backgrounds like this patty, where there is a questionable object, we can very precisely tell a difference of not just is there an object on a background, but what is that object, allowing you to quickly go back through your process and see where those types of objects occur. Is it a supplier? Is it me? Is it a specific conveyor belt in our plant? So we really provide much richer experience and much more information about the foreign materials, but the same machine at the same time can give you chemistry information. So what is the composition of this patty, or is this pork or beef, or what's the quality of something like a chicken breast? So those are the problems that we're solving now more and more. And again, that close relationship between us, the vendor, and you, the quality control people in the plant, is very important. Having an open discussion, understanding each other's limitations and problems really enables us to provide a solution that's super flexible, learns continuously, and provides a great protection against unforeseen presence of foreign objects. So in summary, I hope we convince you that the multidisciplinary, multi-hurdle approaches should be considered in a plant. And also things like culture, prevention, detection, all of that is quite important for foreign material elimination in the stream. True detection requires measurement and a decision. It's not just seeing something small. Is this actually a problem? And how do we reject it? And detection curves and false rejection rates are extremely important to be able to compare different technologies and different detection systems. detection systems like X-rays, metal detection, and cameras all offer different benefits and drawbacks. So again, talking with vendors, talking to your colleagues about what they've implemented, what worked for them, it probably is a good idea. And then I would like to propose that working with PPO or companies like us should really be considered as an integral part of your improvement and efficiency improvements in the plant, because we are providing more information and therefore your product is better inspected and safer. So thank you. And I think we can open to another poll and a couple more questions.
Great, thank you so much, Olga. So folks, you'll see now that there's a quick poll appearing on the screen. And while that is running through, I will begin the Q&A. The first question is for Olga. You showed a lot of examples in meat products. What other products do you work with?
So we have worked with produce like potatoes, green peppers, carrots. We actually have had a project with a cannabis manufacturer to see foreign objects on dried cannabis. So essentially, you know, very similar technology applies. The training of the models happens in a very similar way. So I would say this is applicable to any problem that is presenting food fast enough, and you know, the foreign objects that you want to detect or issues you want to detect are, you know, 1.5+ millimeters.
Okay, very good. This is for Jeremiah. For a company just getting started in their foreign materials prevention journey, what should be our first priorities?
I think the first priority definitely needs to be understanding your process and understanding the risk points and understanding what you need to be ready to have a prevention strategy for. So taking that risk assessment approach and looking at where those introductory points are, and then asking yourselves, what controls do I have here? So very, very similar to the hazard analysis process. But I would strongly recommend including the aspect of any foreign object or any foreign material, whether it's a food safety hazard or not.
Okay, great. And what you've been in the products that you've been using, or the ingredients that you've been looking at detecting, are there any ingredients that require further processing, such as powders?
Yes, yep, absolutely. So we have a very broad portfolio of incoming ingredients, and some of them do include spices and powders and so forth as well. Now, those incoming and some of those incoming ingredients might not be subject to all the same hurdles or all the same inspection systems. There's definitely multiple strategies that might not involve, you know, an actual piece of technology or detection to adequately assure that there's no foreign material present. Like a screen, for example, would be a perfect example of an intervention, you know, a foreign material intervention for dry ingredients.
Okay. Great, thank you. This one is for Olga. What are some examples of things we could do with the data that you collect using your system?
That's a very good question, and I think we're just starting to scratch the surface on that. But to give you an example, we're working with a chicken processor that is not only looking for foreign materials, but also trying to sort out woody breast issues. So quality measurement. We have done something like looking at higher end pork loins for Japanese market, and being able to divert them earlier on in the process to better, the high quality pork loins were then processed and handled differently than kind of the picnic lines. So kind of how do we do the sorting and efficiency improvements in process? But what I get really excited about is when we're looking at woody breast issues, for example, or these higher end pork loins, we can tie that data back to the farm and how the animal was raised, what breeds were selected, and so forth, and then start seeing correlations across the entire value chain. So how did, which pig did we raise and how did we raise it? What's the quality of a pork loin, and then how will it taste when we deliver it to a customer? I think that's already possible. We just have to put all the pieces together.
Okay, great. What is your approach to daily or shift-wise verification of the detection functions?
It's absolutely necessary. So, and again, this is one of those things where our approach is we have a standard approach, is that we have a verification, at least a daily verification activity across all of these, critical components to our process. If we determine that we have a necessary control in our process around for material, we are going to have a method to verify that it's working properly as well. Now, that frequency may vary depending on the equipment, depending on its capabilities and so forth, but at a minimum, we would be doing some sort of a verification activity, and that usually is daily.
Okay, very good. Next question. Your multi-hurdle line has MD plus X-ray plus hyperspectral imaging. Now, is it in that order, and how does the reject mechanism interact with each of these units?
Thanks for that question. I don't know for sure the order, and honestly, that the order of detection wouldn't be a priority to us, but a priority to us is definitely having separate reject mechanisms for each of them, so we can truly, like Olga was talking about, truly get back and understanding, what did we find, what found it, how can we determine where it came from in our process. So that is definitely a critical component for it, is that the reject stream is independent, or sorry, dependent of the detection equipment.
Okay, very good, thank you. And just a reminder to folks on the line, we did update the PDF. So if you had trouble downloading it initially, please do take advantage in the couple of minutes that we have left to download the presentation, the PDF, while we're still on the line today. So this is a nice final question, and this is for both of you. So perhaps we'll have Olga go first and then Jeremiah. What changes do you see coming in the industry around foreign materials, and do you think we can ever get to zero foreign materials?
I think again, the multi-hurdle approach is going to become kind of the de facto solution for the reasons that I kind of tried to explain in the presentation. And unfortunately, no, I do not think we can ever get to zero foreign materials. I think processes are becoming more complex. The supply chain is getting more complex for everybody. So I think we'll have more chances of actually getting foreign objects into the stream. And there's no perfect technology. Maybe in multiple decades, we will have super high speed, super high resolution CT scanners, MRI scanners, and hyperspectral scanners. And maybe then we can get very close to zero foreign objects. But we're dealing with, what's interesting, food is super complex. So all these technologies that have been used in car manufacturing and iPhone manufacturing cannot be easily translated to this variable, complex food. And I think that's the problem.
And I completely agree with Olga. It's hard to imagine a day where it's never going to be there. There's just so many opportunities and so many risk points for something to happen. I do think, and and just highlighting this discussion today and what Olga was saying, we're going to get better at detecting it. We're going to be better at finding it. We're going to be better at controlling it. And where the industry going is, I think between our regulatory obligation and us all kind of monitoring ourselves, we're going to be forcing these controls between each other as well. We're already seeing it with our customers and as a supplier and so forth. So I feel like we're all going to be getting better at it, and we're better at detecting it. It may seem like there's more out there, but I feel like it's just we're better at finding it now. It's always been there.
Okay, great. Well, with that, I'd like to thank Olga and Jeremiah for really interesting insights today and a very thorough presentation. I really enjoyed it and found it very interesting, and I'm sure our attendees did as well. And thank you to our sponsor, P&P Optica. This event has been recorded, so within 24 to 48 hours, it will be posted on our website. So you can go to foodsafetytech.com under events and webinars, and you'll find the on-demand version. And please also check that section of our website for our upcoming events. We have the Food Safety Consortium Fall Edition starting in October, and we also have a Food Safety Hazard Series, and foreign matter contamination is a topic that we're looking to address in the fall as well. So we'll have continuing information on what was presented today, and we'll look forward to that as well. So once again, thank you to Olga and Jeremiah. Thanks to our sponsor, P&P Optica. Thanks to our attendees for spending their Thursday afternoon with us, and we look forward to seeing everyone virtually soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.